Queen Evelyn Moonshade stood before the full-length mirror in her chambers, watching her lady's maid adjust the ivory silk of her nightgown. The fabric whispered against her skin like a ghost, appropriate since that's what she felt like most days. A ghost in her own marriage. The elaborate ritual of preparation felt almost cruel in its familiarity. 7 years of the same motions, the same hopes rising unbidden, only to be dashed come morning. "You look beautiful, Your Majesty," the maid said softly. "Tonight will be different. I can feel it." Evelyn's reflection stared back at her with eyes that had learned not to hope over the last 7 years. 7 years of walking to her husband's chambers once a month with her heart fluttering like a caged bird, only to return at dawn with that same heart, a little more bruised. 84 times she had made this journey. 84 rejections that no one in the kingdom knew about except her. "Yes, perhaps it will," she murmured, forcing a smile on her face. What else could she say? That she'd stopped believing in difference somewhere around the 3rd year of her marriage? The royal marriage that had united 2 powerful bloodlines, but had never truly joined 2 people. The door burst open, and her sister Celine swept in, carrying a small vial of amber liquid. Where Evelyn had inherited their mother's golden hair and quiet composure, Celine was all fire. Dark curls, flashing eyes, and opinions she never bothered to contain. The sisters were as different as sun and moon, yet bound by a love that had sustained them through the darkest of times. "I brought you something," Celine said, her eyes bright with excitement. "It's a fertility tonic, old magic from the southern covens." Evelyn sighed, exhaustion settling in her bones. "I don't need—" "You've been trying for 7 years, Evelyn. 7 years!" Celine's eyes shone with fierce protectiveness. "The court whispers. They say you're—" "I know what they say," Evelyn interrupted firmly. She'd heard it in corridors, seen it in pitying glances, felt it in the way conversation died when she entered rooms where noble ladies gathered with their children. They called her the Barren Queen. And why wouldn't they? After 7 years, she hadn't yet given the kingdom an heir. She watched those other women, the way they cradled their babies, the casual ease with which they adjusted a blanket or soothed a cry. Such simple gestures that looked like magic to her, an impossible, forbidden gift. A life she would never know, though not for the reasons the court believed. "Then let me help you prove them wrong," Celine squeezed her hand. "Please, you'd be such a wonderful mother, Evelyn. I see how you are with the children in the village." "Stop." The word came out sharper than intended. Evelyn softened her voice. "Thank you, but no amount of fertility magic could fix a marriage that had never been consummated." The problem wasn't her womb, but the 10 feet of careful distance her husband maintained between them at all times. But she couldn't say that. She couldn't tell her beloved sister that she remained as untouched by King Magnus as the day she'd wed him. The shame of it, the confusion, the hurt. It was a private ache she'd learned to carry alone for the sake of their reputation, the kingdom. "Thank you," she said finally, tucking the vial away. A maid appeared with Evelyn's robe. "It's time, Your Majesty." Evelyn stood, squaring her shoulders. 7 years had taught her many things, but perhaps the most valuable was this. Dignity could be worn like armor. She would need every piece of it tonight. The walk to the king's chambers felt longer each month, through the portrait gallery, where the stern faces of Blackthorn ancestors watched her passage with judgment in their painted eyes. Past the council chamber, where Magnus spent most of his days, ruling the kingdom of Shadowcrest with wisdom and strength. Down the corridor, where moonlight spilled through tall windows, casting silver pools on the stone floor. And the worst of all, past a nursery that remained cruelly empty. Tonight she paused in the doorway, imagining it filled with life. A carved wooden cradle beside the window, stuffed animals scattered across a thick rug, the scent of milk and powder, and the indescribable sweetness of a baby's skin. Her heart beat too fast. For what if tonight was different? What if her husband was waiting? What if he looked at her, reached for her? What if tonight was the night she finally got to become a mother? She crushed the thought before it could take root. She'd been 19 when they'd married, terrified and foolish enough to hope. When Magnus had taken her hand during the ceremony, for one breathless moment, she'd felt a pull, a recognition, something that whispered, "Mate." Then he'd released her hand and escorted her to her chambers. "Our marriage serves its purpose," he'd said, voice cold. "The alliance is secured. That is enough." But it wasn't enough. Not for the kingdom that needed an heir. Not for the wedding contract that stipulated they'd try. Not for her heart, which had somehow decided to want impossible things. A husband who looked at her like she mattered, and a child to love with every piece of herself. And so, as per the marriage agreement, once a month, she would come to his chambers so they would try. Except they never did. Evelyn reached the king's chambers and paused, her palm pressed flat against the heavy oak door. Behind this door lay her husband, and the thought had her wolf stirring beneath her skin, whining softly. Tonight would be no different. She knew that. And yet, something close to hope beat its wings dangerously against her ribs. Not hope for his love. She'd buried that dream long ago. But hope for a child she couldn't let go of. She opened the door without knocking. The king's chambers were dark except for dying embers in the fireplace. Heavy curtains blocked the moonlight, casting everything in shades of shadow. The air smelled of pine and leather and something else, something sharper. "Your Majesty." Her voice came out softer than intended, almost tentative. Silence, but not the heavy silence of emptiness. Someone was here. She could feel it, an awareness that prickled along her skin. Whenever Magnus was near, her wolf grew restless. It had been that way since the first time they'd met. A recognition of power, of danger, of something her human mind couldn't quite grasp. Her bare feet whispered across thick carpets as she moved deeper into the room. Now she could make out the massive four-poster bed against the far wall, its curtains drawn. With each step, her wolf stirred as her husband's scent wrapped around her like a physical touch. Wild and clean and utterly male, filling her lungs until she felt lightheaded. Her wolf whined, a sound of longing that made her chest ache. She shouldn't want him. 7 years of rejection should have killed whatever foolish thing lived in her chest. But God's help her. Her pace quickened despite herself. Maybe tonight, maybe this time. Her hands trembled as she reached the bed. She could hear breathing now, deep and even. "Please," she thought, "please just let this work. I don't need you to love me. I just need—" Evelyn drew back the curtain, hope and dread warring in her throat. Magnus lay on his back, chest rising and falling in the deep rhythm of sleep. Moonlight filtering through a gap in the curtains painted him in silver and shadow. The hard planes of his face, the dark sweep of his lashes, the strong column of his throat. Even deep in sleep, he looked like a king. Powerful, untouchable, hers in name only. "Magnus!" She spoke louder this time, leaning over him. Nothing, not even a flutter of his eyelids. Evelyn swallowed against the hurt rising in her throat. Maybe he was simply exhausted. But then her foot struck something on the floor. She looked down and saw a small glass vial lying on its side by the bed, empty. Evelyn frowned and bent slowly, bringing it to her nose. Then she froze. The sharp smell she'd detected earlier wasn't from the fireplace or his normal scent. It was silver extract, a powerful toxin to werewolves, capable of paralyzing or even killing in high doses. She stared at the empty vial, then at her husband's too still form. Understanding crashed over her. This was a sleeping draught, but not just any sleeping draught. A silver-infused paralytic that would ensure he couldn't move, couldn't respond, couldn't touch her. He had drugged himself rather than be awake when she arrived. Why? The word escaped before she could stop it. Evelyn gripped his shoulder and shook hard, harder than she'd ever dared touch him. "Magnus, wake up." His head lolled slightly, but his eyes remained closed. Whatever he'd taken had pulled him deep under. "How dare you?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "I'm your wife. I'm your wife. And you drug yourself unconscious rather than—" Her voice broke as she stared at his sleeping face. "I don't need your love," she said, softer now. "I know what this marriage is. I've accepted it. But this?" She held up the vial. "This is cruel." 7 years of monthly rejections crashed down on her. 84 nights of walking back to her chambers alone, of silent tears into her pillow, of wondering what was so repulsive about her that her husband couldn't bear to touch her, even to secure his bloodline. Something inside her broke. The careful wall she'd built around her hurt, cracked and shattered, and rage poured through. Her wolf surged, golden eyes bleeding into her human ones, claws extending from her fingertips. With a snarl that was more animal than human, she flung the vial against the far wall where it shattered, silver liquid leaving a stain like tears on the stone. In that moment, a shadow shifted in the far corner of the room. Evelyn whirled, suddenly alert. She wasn't alone. The realization came too late as a figure darted from behind a tapestry, something gleaming in its hand. An assassin. Her wolf's reflexes saved her. Evelyn dropped and rolled as a silver-tipped dagger sliced through the air where she had been standing. The assassin moved with inhuman speed, clearly not fully human. A half-blood vampire from the Bloodhaven Empire, their sworn enemies. The king first, then the Baron Queen, the assassin hissed, circling her. Lord Bloodhaven sends his regards. Evelyn backed toward the bed, her mind racing. Magnus was unconscious, helpless. The silver in his system would prevent him from shifting or healing. The guard outside would be dead or subdued. She was on her own. "You'll find I'm harder to kill than you think," she growled, letting her wolf rise closer to the surface. Her nightgown was hardly battle attire, but her wolf didn't need weapons. Her claws extended fully, her teeth sharpening. The assassin lunged, the silver blade arcing toward her throat. Evelyn spun away, her movements fluid and quick. The wolf in her blood gave her strength and speed that belied her slender frame. She caught the assassin's arm, feeling skin colder than any living creature's, and used his momentum to slam him into the bedpost. The impact cracked the wooden post, but the assassin barely seemed fazed. He twisted in her grip, his features contorting as his own vampire nature emerged. Red eyes glowed in the darkness, fangs extending. With unnatural strength, he broke her hold and backhanded her across the room. Evelyn crashed into Magnus's writing desk, sending papers and ink bottles scattering. Pain lanced through her side. She pushed herself up, spitting blood from a split lip. "Did you really think the king would be alone?" the assassin mocked. "He's been drugged regularly for months. We just had to wait for the right night." Evelyn's eyes widened. Not by Magnus's hand, then. Someone had been poisoning him. The realization sent fresh fury through her veins. She didn't have time to process the implications. The assassin was coming for her again. This time she didn't try to match his strength. Instead, she grabbed the heavy silver candlestick from the desk and hurled it with all her might. It struck the assassin in the center of his chest. Silver burned vampire flesh as surely as it weakened werewolves. The assassin's skin sizzled and smoked where the candlestick touched him. He shrieked, clawing at his chest. Evelyn didn't waste the advantage. She launched herself at him, no longer thinking like a queen, but a wolf defending its territory. Her claws raked across his face, drawing black ichor instead of blood. The assassin staggered back, but recovered quickly. His hand closed around her throat, lifting her off her feet. "I was going to make this quick," he snarled. "Now I think I'll drain you slowly while your king watches, helpless." Spots danced at the edges of Evelyn's vision as the assassin's grip tightened. Her wolf howled inside her, demanding freedom. With the last of her strength, she kicked out, her bare foot connecting with his knee. There was a satisfying crack as the joint gave way. The assassin's grip loosened just enough for her to wrench free. She fell to the floor, gasping for air. The assassin stumbled, his leg bent at an unnatural angle. Evelyn's gaze landed on the silver dagger he'd dropped during their struggle. She lunged for it, her fingers closing around the hilt. The silver burned her palm, but her human side was still dominant enough to wield it. The assassin saw her intent and tried to scramble away. Too late. Evelyn drove the blade deep into his chest, aiming for the heart. The assassin's scream cut off abruptly. His body convulsed, skin graying and cracking like ancient parchment as the silver poison spread through his system. Within seconds, he was nothing but dust on the expensive carpet. Evelyn dropped the dagger, her palm blistering from the silver contact. She staggered to her feet, lungs still burning from near strangulation. Blood dripped from her split lip, and every breath sent pain through her ribs. But she was alive. She stumbled to Magnus's side, checking him for injuries. His breathing remained steady, but his skin felt too cool to the touch. How much silver had they been giving him? Enough to weaken him without raising suspicion, apparently. And tonight, enough to ensure he wouldn't wake even during an assassination attempt. "Guards!" she shouted, her voice raspy. "Guards to the king's chambers!" The door burst open moments later, revealing not the royal guards, but Celine, her dark eyes wide with fear. Evelyn! The guards are dead! We're under attack! The entire eastern wing! Her gaze fell on the pile of dust on the floor, then to Magnus's still form. What happened? Bloodhaven, Evelyn said grimly. They've been poisoning him. Get the royal healer, now, and alert Captain Thorne. Celine nodded once, then disappeared. Evelyn turned back to Magnus, reaching for his face. His skin was pale, almost gray. Whatever they'd been giving him, tonight's dose had been meant to kill, not just incapacitate. Her fingers traced the strong line of his jaw, an intimacy she'd never allowed herself before. "Don't you dare die," she whispered fiercely. "Not before I get answers." Magnus remained still, unaware of the battle that had raged around him, unaware of his wife's victory, unaware of the storm of emotions now coursing through her. Relief that he hadn't been rejecting her by choice. Rage that someone had been slowly poisoning him. Fear that they might succeed tonight. And beneath it all, a tiny flicker of hope that she'd long thought extinguished. The royal healer arrived with Celine, his arms full of potions and herbs. "Silver poisoning," Evelyn told him. "Months of it, from what the assassin said." The old man's face paled. "That would explain His Majesty's increasing weakness. We thought it was just exhaustion." "Can you help him?" "We must purge the silver from his system." The healer set to work immediately, mixing potions with practiced efficiency. "But, Your Majesty, it will be painful. The silver has had time to bind to his blood." "Do what you must," Evelyn commanded. She turned to Celine. "What's happening in the rest of the castle?" "Coordinated attack. At least a dozen Bloodhaven assassins. Captain Thorne and his men are engaging them now." Celine's expression was grim. "But that's not all. There's something strange about this attack. Some of the servants say they saw Councilmember Draven letting them in through the eastern postern gate." "Draven? He's one of Magnus's most trusted advisors." "Apparently not trusted enough," Celine said darkly. "This wasn't just an assassination attempt. This was a coup." Before Evelyn could respond, a commotion at the door drew their attention. Captain Thorne entered, his armor splattered with black ichor, a sword dripping the same substance in his hand. "Your Majesty, the attack has been repelled, but Lord Draven has escaped, along with several other council members." "Casualties?" Evelyn asked, falling easily into the role of ruler while her husband lay incapacitated. 3 guards dead, several wounded, 2 of the assassins captured alive for questioning. Evelyn nodded, her mind already working through the implications. A coordinated attack with inside help, Magnus being slowly poisoned for months. The entire thing spoke of long planning and deep betrayal. "Double the guard on all entrances. I want the captured assassins in the silver cells. No one speaks to them without my permission." Her voice was steel, her queen's authority unquestioned despite her torn nightgown and bloodied appearance. "And the council members who fled?" "Traitors," Evelyn said coldly, "to be treated as such when found." Captain Thorne bowed and withdrew to carry out her orders. Celine approached her sister, concern evident in her eyes. "You're hurt." "It's nothing." Evelyn dismissed her injuries with a wave. Her attention was fixed on Magnus as the healer worked over him, forcing a foul-smelling concoction down his throat. "How long until he wakes?" "If we can purge the silver, a few hours. But, Your Majesty—" The healer hesitated. "There may be side effects. Silver poisoning of this duration. It's rare for anyone to survive it." Fear clutched at Evelyn's heart. "But he will survive. He is the Alpha King. His bloodline is strong." The healer didn't quite meet her eyes. "But you should prepare yourself. He may not be the same man when he wakes." Celine put a comforting hand on Evelyn's shoulder. "You need to rest. Let me tend to your wounds." "I'm staying with him," Evelyn said with finality. She pulled a chair to Magnus's bedside and sat, her back straight despite her exhaustion and pain. "Send for me the moment there's any change in the prisoners, and I want every piece of food and drink that enters the king's chambers checked personally by you from now on." Celine recognized the dismissal and nodded, leaving Evelyn alone with her unconscious husband and the busy healer. When the door closed, Evelyn finally allowed her shoulders to slump. Her hand found Magnus's, careful to avoid the areas where the healer was applying poultices. His skin was cool to the touch, but she could feel the steady beat of his pulse beneath her fingers. It was the first time she had held his hand since their wedding day. Something about the contact made her wolf stir restlessly beneath her skin. Mine, it seemed to say, always mine. Hours passed. The healer eventually withdrew to prepare more medicines, leaving strict instructions for the potions to be administered regularly. Evelyn remained at Magnus's side, her body aching from battle and her mind racing with questions. Why had Magnus been targeted? Why had trusted council members betrayed him? And how long had her husband been suffering from silver poisoning without anyone noticing? Dawn was breaking when Magnus finally stirred. A small sound escaped his lips, something between a groan and a growl. Evelyn leaned forward, hope and apprehension warring in her chest. "Magnus?" His eyelids fluttered, then opened. For the first time in months, Evelyn looked directly into her husband's eyes. They were the deep amber of his wolf, not the human brown she was accustomed to. The wolf was close to the surface, fighting the poison. Those inhuman eyes fixed on her face, confusion giving way to recognition. "Evelyn." His voice was raw, barely audible. "You're hurt." She touched her split lip self-consciously. "It's nothing. How do you feel?" Magnus tried to sit up, then fell back with a hiss of pain. "Like I've been trampled by a herd of elk. What happened?" "You were poisoned. Silver extract. From what the assassin said, it's been happening for months." His eyes widened. "Assassin?" Evelyn explained the night's events quickly, from finding him unconscious to the Bloodhaven attack and Draven's betrayal. Magnus listened in silence, his expression growing darker with each word. "And you fought the assassin, alone." She shrugged, uncomfortable with his intense gaze. "I did what was necessary. You saved my life." There was something in his voice she'd never heard before. Wonder, perhaps, or respect. "Yes, well, the kingdom needs its king." Evelyn stood abruptly, needing distance from those amber eyes that seemed to see too much. "The healer says you need rest. I should let you—" "Wait!" Magnus's hand shot out, catching her wrist. The contact sent a jolt through her, her wolf surging in response. From his sharp intake of breath, she knew he felt it too. "The vial, by the bed. You thought I did that to myself." It wasn't a question. Evelyn couldn't meet his gaze. "You've never wanted me in your bed. What was I supposed to think?" His grip tightened, not painfully, but with an urgency she didn't understand. "That was never by choice." "What are you saying?" Magnus's eyes burned into hers. "I need to tell you something. About us. About why we couldn't—" He grimaced, a spasm of pain cutting off his words. "You're in no condition for this conversation," Evelyn said, trying to pull away. His grip remained firm. "No, you need to know. Now." He took a labored breath. "The celestial curse. Have you heard of it?" Evelyn frowned. "A legend. A fairy tale to frighten children." "Not a tale." Magnus's voice dropped lower, forcing her to lean in to hear him. "It's real. And it's been the curse of the Blackthorn line for 3 centuries. The curse that prevents the Alpha King from touching his true mate?" Evelyn shook her head. "Magnus, that's a story old nurses tell. It can't possibly—" "I felt it the moment I took your hand at our wedding," he interrupted. "The pain, like fire in my veins. The curse awakening. You are my true mate, Evelyn. The only woman my wolf will ever recognize. And if I touch you, really touch you, the curse will ensure one of us dies." Evelyn stared at him, disbelief warring with the strange sense that he was telling the truth. "That's why you've kept your distance all these years. I couldn't risk it. Couldn't risk you." His hand released her wrist reluctantly. "I tried to explain that first night. But how do you tell your bride that you can never touch her? That the marriage will never be real? That she'll be denied children, affection, everything a woman deserves?" I couldn't find the words. "So you said nothing," Evelyn whispered. "You let me believe you found me repulsive." Pain that had nothing to do with silver poisoning flashed across his face. "It seemed kinder than the truth. That I wanted you. That my wolf howled for you every night. That being near you and not touching you was the sweetest torture I've ever endured." Evelyn's heart pounded against her ribs. 7 years of doubt and hurt began to crack, revealing something new and terrifying underneath. Hope. Dangerous, fragile hope. "Why tell me now?" Magnus's lips curved into a bitter smile. "Because I nearly died tonight without ever having told you the truth. And that seemed like the greatest failure of all." A knock at the door prevented her response. Captain Thorne entered, his expression grim. "Forgive the intrusion, your majesties, but there's something you need to see." Evelyn straightened, pulling her queen's dignity around her like a cloak. "What is it?" "The prisoners, they're changing, like nothing I've ever seen. Magnus struggled to sit up, this time succeeding despite the obvious pain it caused him. "Show me." "You're in no condition," Evelyn began. "I am still king," Magnus cut her off, though his tone held no anger. "And if Bloodhaven is experimenting with new methods of attack, I need to see it firsthand." Captain Thorne helped Magnus to his feet. The king swayed slightly, but remained standing through sheer force of will. Evelyn noted how the captain was careful never to let his king's bare skin touch his own. Did everyone know about the curse except her? "At least put on proper attire," she said, gesturing to his sleep clothes. "You can't address the court like that." Magnus's amber eyes met hers, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. Always the practical queen. 20 minutes later, they made their way to the dungeons. Magnus now dressed in a simple tunic and breeches, though he'd foregone his usual royal regalia. Evelyn walked beside him, close enough to catch him if he stumbled, but careful not to touch. The curse. Could it really be true? Part of her wanted to dismiss it as superstition, but the look in Magnus's eyes when he'd spoken of it. The dungeons were cold and damp, the walls lined with silver to contain supernatural prisoners. 2 cells had been occupied, heavily guarded. As they approached, Evelyn could hear strange, guttural sounds emanating from within. "They started changing about an hour ago," Captain Thorne explained, leading them to the first cell. "First, it was just their eyes. Then, he didn't need to finish. Evelyn could see for herself. The creature in the cell barely resembled the assassin they'd captured. Its body was twisted, halfway between human and something else. Not wolf, not vampire, but some horrific amalgamation of both. Bones protruded at unnatural angles, skin stretched thin over bulging muscles. Its eyes were solid black, no white or iris visible. "What in the 7 hells?" Magnus breathed. The creature hurled itself at the bars, claws reaching for them. Where the silver touched its flesh, black smoke rose, but it didn't seem to feel pain. It just kept reaching, its mouth open in a silent scream. "The other one's the same," Captain Thorne said, leading them to the second cell. "They can't speak anymore, just make those sounds." The second creature was, if possible, even more grotesquely transformed than the first. Its jaw had elongated, filled with row upon row of needle-like teeth. Its spine had curved, forcing it into a hunched posture. But the most disturbing feature was the symbol carved into its forehead, a crescent moon pierced by a sword. "Ravenna," Magnus whispered, his face draining of color. "She's returned." "Who?" Evelyn asked. But Magnus was already turning away, moving with newfound urgency despite his weakened state. "Call the council, those who remain loyal, and find Celine. We need her sight." His voice had taken on the unmistakable timbre of command, the Alpha King fully present despite his physical weakness. "Magnus, who is Ravenna?" Evelyn pursued him as he strode through the corridors, servants scattering before their king's determined pace. "A nightmare from this past, the one who cursed my bloodline." Magnus didn't slow or look back. A queen of winter and darkness who should have been dead 300 years ago. They reached the council chamber to find Celine already there, her expression troubled. "I saw her," she said without preamble. "In the flames, the ice witch comes with the next full moon." Magnus nodded grimly. 3 days. Evelyn looked between her husband and her sister, frustration mounting. "Would someone please explain what's happening?" Magnus finally turns to her, his amber eyes reflecting firelight. "War is coming, Evelyn, but not with Bloodhaven. They're just pawns. The real enemy is far worse." He gestured for her to take a seat at the massive oak table. "What do you know of Ravenna Dreadwinter?" "A legend," Evelyn said slowly. "The ice witch who ruled the northern wastes centuries ago. She's said to have murdered 100 alphas and bathed in their blood to maintain her youth." "Not 100, 99. Magnus's voice was flat. "I was to be the 100th. But my ancestor, King Alistair Blackthorn, made a bargain to save me." "You?" Evelyn frowned. "But that was 300 years ago." "I am 412 years old, though I appear merely 40, Magnus said quietly. "Another effect of the curse. I cannot die while it remains in effect. I cannot age. I exist in this half-life, ruling generation after generation of my people, watching everyone I care for grow old and die, everyone except my true mate, who I can never touch." Evelyn stared at him, trying to process this revelation. "And this Ravenna, she's still alive?" "She exists. I wouldn't call it living. Celine spoke up, her eyes distant. She's been gathering power in the void between worlds, and now she's found a way back. But why? Evelyn asked. What does she want? To complete what she started, Magnus said grimly. She needs the blood of the 100th Alpha to finish her immortality ritual. My blood. And now she's found a way to combine werewolf and vampire essence to create servants who can withstand silver. The assassins were just the beginning. How do we stop her? Magnus and Celine exchanged a look that made Evelyn's blood run cold. There is a prophecy, Celine began hesitantly. One I've kept from you, sister, about the blood of the moon uniting with the blood of the wolf. Your bloodline, the Moonshades, carries ancient magic, Magnus continued. Magic that's been dormant for generations. But in you, it's stronger. I've sensed it from the first moment we met. What are you saying? The prophecy speaks of a child, Celine said softly. A child of both bloodlines who will have the power to banish the Ice Witch forever. Evelyn's hand went instinctively to her flat stomach. A child? But you just said we can't touch, that the curse prevents— There is another way, Magnus said, his eyes never leaving hers. A ritual as old as the curse itself. Dangerous. Painful. With no guarantee of success, but if it works, we conceive a child without physical touch, through the joining of our souls rather than our bodies. And that child, born of magic and will rather than flesh, would carry the power to end Ravenna forever. Evelyn sat in stunned silence, trying to absorb everything she'd just learned. Her husband was centuries old, cursed by an immortal ice witch. She herself apparently carried dormant magical abilities. And now they were discussing conceiving a child through some ancient ritual to fulfill a prophecy. This is a lot, she finally managed. Magnus's expression softened. I know. And I've given you no reason to trust me. 7 years of distance and silence. I wouldn't blame you if you refused. What happens if I do refuse? Then I face Ravenna alone when she comes, as I always knew I would eventually. And you'll die, Evelyn said flatly. Yes. And if this ritual works, if we somehow conceive this prophesied child, then we have a chance. Not just for victory, but for something like a real life. Together. The longing in his voice was unmistakable. The curse can be broken. That's what Ravenna fears most. Why she's chosen now to return. Evelyn stood, needing space to think. 7 years of hurt and loneliness couldn't be erased by one conversation, no matter how revelatory. And yet, there had always been something between them. Something her wolf recognized, even when her human heart rebelled. I need time, she said finally. Of course. Magnus inclined his head. But not too much time. The moon waits for no one. Celine approached her sister, taking her hands. I know this is overwhelming, but I've seen what's coming, Evelyn. The death, the ice, the darkness. Ravenna won't stop with Magnus. She'll freeze the entire kingdom, enslave our people. What happened tonight was just a taste of her power. Evelyn pulled her hands away gently. I understand the stakes, but this isn't just about fighting a witch. You're asking me to bind myself forever to a man who has kept the truth from me for 7 years. To risk my life on a ritual none of us fully understands, to bear a child who will be born with the weight of prophecy on their shoulders. I'm asking you to consider it, Magnus said quietly. That's all. Evelyn met his gaze, searching those amber eyes for something she wasn't sure she'd recognize even if she found it. Trust, honesty, love. I will consider it, she said finally. But I want the full truth, Magnus. Everything. No more secrets. No more half-explanations. If we're to have any chance of facing this together, it has to be as equals. Something like hope flickered in Magnus's eyes. Equals, he agreed. No more secrets. Then I think you should begin by explaining exactly how this ritual works, and what it will cost us both. The sun had fully risen, bathing the council chamber in golden light. Outside, the castle was awakening to a new day, unaware of the revelations of the night, unaware of the Ice Witch's impending arrival, unaware of the choices their queen now faced. Evelyn took a seat opposite her husband, her back straight, her expression composed. She was no longer the rejected wife, nursing private hurts in silence. She was a queen facing a threat to her kingdom, a woman being asked to fulfill a prophecy, a potential mother whose choices would shape not just her life, but the lives of generations to come. And somewhere deep inside her, her wolf stirred in anticipation. The ancient ritual chamber beneath Shadowcrest Castle had not been used in generations. Dust shrouded the stone altar at its center. Cobwebs stretched between the ornate pillars, carved with the history of the Blackthorn Pack. Evelyn stood in the doorway, torch in hand, her eyes adjusting to the gloom as she watched Magnus and Celine prepare the space. 3 days had passed since the night of revelations. 3 days of frantic preparation as the full moon approached. 3 days of Evelyn weighing an impossible choice while the threat of Ravenna Dreadwinter loomed ever closer. "Are you certain this will work?" she asked, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. Magnus looked up from the ancient tome he was studying. The silver poisoning had left him weaker than he wanted to admit, but his amber eyes still burned with determination. "No, but it's the only chance we have." Celine approached her sister, holding a white silk robe. "The ritual requires that both participants be purified. You'll need to change into this." Evelyn took the garment, the fabric cool against her skin. "And then what?" "Then we attempt something that hasn't been done in 300 years, Magnus said, closing the book. "A soul binding that might allow us to conceive a child without physical contact." "Might?" Evelyn echoed. "The old texts aren't exactly specific about success rates." His attempt at humor fell flat in the solemn chamber. Evelyn had spent the past 3 days researching everything she could find about Ravenna Dreadwinter, the celestial curse, and the ritual they were about to attempt. What she'd discovered had only deepened her apprehension. The soul binding was dangerous, potentially fatal to both participants, and even if they succeeded, the resulting pregnancy would be unlike any normal gestation. "Are you having second thoughts?" Celine asked softly. "Second, third, and fourth," Evelyn admitted. "But what choice do we have? Ravenna arrives tomorrow night, and according to your visions, she brings an army." Reports had been pouring in from the northern borders. Villages frozen solid, their inhabitants turned to ice statues, rivers stopping mid-flow, and strange, twisted creatures like the ones they'd captured, but larger, stronger, more numerous. The Ice Witch was announcing her return with a display of power meant to terrify. It was working. "You still have a choice," Magnus said, approaching but maintaining his customary distance. "You could leave. Take Celine and as many of our people as possible south, beyond Ravenna's reach. And abandon our kingdom? Our people?" Evelyn shook her head. "That's not a choice. It's cowardice. It's survival." Magnus's voice roughened. "I've faced Ravenna before. I know what she's capable of." "So have I," Celine interjected. "In my visions. And I've seen only one path that doesn't end in darkness. This ritual, this child, the prophecy fulfilled." Evelyn turned the white robe over in her hands, considering. She had spent 7 years in a marriage that was a shell, empty of the connection she'd secretly yearned for. 7 years wondering why her husband couldn't bear to touch her, believing herself unwanted, undesirable. And now to discover that it had all been because of a curse, that Magnus had kept his distance to protect her. Part of her wanted to refuse simply out of lingering hurt, but a larger part, the queen in her, knew her duty. And perhaps, a small voice whispered, this was also a chance for something real between them at last. "I need a moment alone," she said finally. Celine squeezed her shoulder gently. "Of course, we still have preparations to complete. Take your time." Evelyn climbed the narrow stone stairs that led from the ritual chamber to a small antechamber above. Through a narrow window she could see the castle grounds below, bathed in the light of the waxing moon. Tomorrow night, that moon would be full, and Ravenna would come. The door behind her opened, and she turned, expecting Celine. Instead, Magnus stood there, keeping a careful distance. "I apologize for the intrusion," he said, "but there's something you should know before you make your decision." "More secrets?" Evelyn couldn't keep the edge from her voice. "Not a secret. A confession." He remained in the doorway, as if afraid to come closer. "You asked for the full truth. This is part of it." Evelyn gestured for him to continue. "I chose you," he said simply. "For the political alliance, I know." "No." Magnus shook his head. "I mean, yes, the alliance with your family was advantageous, but I could have chosen any daughter of the Moonshade line. There were others of suitable age and standing. I chose you specifically." "Why?" "Because I had seen you once before, at a festival in the border village of Ashford. You were there with a group of children, telling them stories." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You didn't see me. I was observing my kingdom in disguise, as I sometimes do. But I saw you, the way you were with those children, your kindness, your patience." Evelyn remembered that day, 5 summers ago, before their marriage. She had been visiting her cousin who lived in Ashford. "You saw me and decided I would make a suitable queen? I saw you and knew I would never want anyone else." The raw honesty in his voice made her breath catch. "I knew the curse would prevent a true marriage. I knew it was selfish to bind you to me. But I couldn't bear the thought of you belonging to another. So you condemned me to a half-life instead?" The words came out harsher than intended. 7 years of rejection and loneliness? Pain flashed across his face. "Yes, and I have regretted it every day. Not choosing you, I could never regret that. But the pain I've caused you, the distance I've had to maintain." His hands clenched at his sides. "Do you know what it's like to want someone so desperately that your entire being aches with it, and to know that a single touch could destroy them?" "No," she said softly, "I don't. That has been my existence for 7 years, watching you from across rooms, smelling your scent on the air, hearing your voice, and wanting nothing more than to answer it with my touch." His amber eyes glowed in the dim light. "I have loved you from afar, Evelyn, every day, every moment, even knowing I could never show it." The confession hung between them, changing everything and nothing at once. 7 years could not be undone with words, no matter how heartfelt, and yet, "Why tell me this now?" "Because you deserve to know what you're agreeing to. This ritual, it's not just a magical procedure, it's an act of creation, of commitment. If we succeed, we will be bound in ways that transcend the physical." He took a deep breath. "I want you to know that for me, that binding already exists, has existed from the moment I first saw you." Evelyn turned back to the window, needing a moment to process his words. All these years, she had believed herself unwanted. To discover now that she had been desired, had been chosen, had been loved from afar. "The ritual will allow our souls to touch," Magnus continued quietly, "even if our bodies cannot. The texts describe it as the truest form of intimacy possible, more profound than physical coupling. I cannot offer you a normal marriage, Evelyn, but I can offer you this, my soul, laid bare before yours, if you want it." She turned to face him. "And if we succeed, if we conceive this child? Then according to the prophecy, our child will have the power to break the curse, to defeat Ravenna, and perhaps," he hesitated, "perhaps to give us the chance for a real life together, the life I've dreamed of giving you." Evelyn thought of the empty nursery she passed each month on her way to her husband's chambers, of the children in the village who had never known their queen was barren, of the court whispers that had followed her for 7 years. But more than that, she thought of Magnus, of the loneliness he must have endured for centuries, of the weight of a curse that had forced him to push away the one person his wolf had recognized as mate. She thought of her own wolf, how it had always stirred in his presence, how it had recognized something her human mind could not comprehend. "Mine," it had whispered, "always mine." "I'll do it," she said, the words coming more easily than expected. "Not just for the kingdom, not just to stop Ravenna, but for us, for the chance that we might find something real together, even if it's not what either of us imagined." Relief and something deeper flooded Magnus's eyes. "Thank you," he said simply. "Don't thank me yet. We still have to survive the ritual." "We will." His certainty warmed her. "You are stronger than you know, Evelyn Moonshade, strong enough to endure 7 years of rejection without breaking, strong enough to face an assassin in your nightgown, strong enough for this." She almost smiled at that. "Perhaps I am." Magnus stepped back from the doorway. "I'll let you prepare. The ritual begins at midnight." When he was gone, Evelyn turned once more to the window. The stars above were bright, but clouds were gathering on the northern horizon. Ice clouds, unnatural in the summer warmth, Ravenna's harbingers. Tomorrow night, the ice witch would come to claim what she believed was hers. But Evelyn had made her choice. She would not surrender Magnus, not surrender their kingdom, not surrender the future that had been denied them for so long. She changed into the white silk robe, letting her golden hair fall loose down her back as the ritual required. Then she descended the stone stairs, her bare feet silent on the cold stone. The ritual chamber had been transformed. Dozens of candles now illuminated the space, their light reflecting off silver bowls filled with sacred water. The stone altar had been cleansed, draped with white linen embroidered with ancient runes. The air smelled of sage and moonflower. Purification herbs burned to cleanse the space. Celine stood at the head of the altar, now dressed in the midnight blue robes of a seer. Her dark curls were bound with silver thread, her eyes lined with kohl to enhance her vision beyond the veil. In her hands, she held a ceremonial dagger, its blade gleaming in the candlelight. Magnus waited on the far side of the chamber. He, too, wore a white robe, his broad shoulders and powerful frame making the simple garment look regal. His amber eyes found hers immediately, and the intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. "Are you ready?" Celine asked as Evelyn approached. "As I'll ever be." "Then we begin." Celine raised her arms. "Tonight, beneath the waxing moon, we call upon the ancient powers of our bloodlines. The moonshade line, keepers of visions and healing. The blackthorn line, guardians of strength and territory. Two lines, separated by the celestial curse, but destined to unite." She motioned for Evelyn to lie on one side of the altar and Magnus on the other. They obeyed, positioning themselves so they faced each other across the stone. Close enough to see every detail of each other's faces, but with enough distance to prevent accidental contact. "First, the blood offering," Celine continued. She approached Evelyn with the ceremonial dagger. "Blood of the moonshade line freely given to bind the ritual." Evelyn extended her palm. The blade stung as Celine drew it across her skin, but she did not flinch. Her blood dripped into one of the silver bowls, crimson against the polished metal. Celine moved to Magnus next, performing the same ritual. When both bowls contained their blood, she mixed them together with a silver rod, chanting words in an ancient language Evelyn only partially understood. "The blood mingles as your souls soon shall," Celine explained. "Now we prepare the binding agents." From a small wooden box, she withdrew several items: a lock of Evelyn's hair, collected that morning, a fang from Magnus, shed during his last full moon shift, petals from a midnight rose that bloomed only once a century, and finally, a small vial of clear liquid that seemed to glow with an inner light. "Essence of the celestial moon," Celine explained, noting Evelyn's curious gaze. "Harvested during the last blood moon, the key component that will allow your souls to connect despite the curse." She combined these items with the mixed blood, grinding them together in a mortar of pure silver. The resulting mixture gave off a soft blue glow. "Now," Celine said, her voice deepening as she entered a trance-like state, "you must both drink." She divided the mixture into 2 chalices, offering one to each of them. Evelyn took hers with steady hands, though her heart raced. Across from her, Magnus did the same. "Drink as one," Celine instructed. "Let the potion open the pathways between your souls." Evelyn raised the chalice to her lips, her eyes locked with Magnus's. As one, they drank. The liquid burned like fire going down, then spread icy tendrils throughout her body. Evelyn gasped, nearly dropping the chalice. Every nerve ending suddenly felt alive, hypersensitive. Colors became more vivid, sounds sharper. She could hear Magnus's heartbeat across the altar, could smell his unique scent with a clarity that made her wolf stir restlessly beneath her skin. "The connection forms," Celine murmured, her own eyes now glowing with an inner light. "Now reach for each other, not with hands but with minds, with souls." Evelyn closed her eyes, unsure how to accomplish what Celine asked. But something within her seemed to know. Her consciousness expanded, reaching outward like invisible tendrils seeking connection, and then she felt it. Magnus. Not his physical presence, but something deeper, more essential. His very being. It began as a gentle brush, like fingertips grazing across sensitive skin, then grew stronger, more insistent, his essence reaching for hers responding in kind. Where they touched, sparks of sensation exploded, pleasure and pain so intertwined she couldn't tell them apart. She heard Magnus gasp, knew he was experiencing the same overwhelming sensations. "Open yourselves," Celine's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Let the barriers fall." Evelyn surrendered to the connection, letting her innermost self flow toward Magnus, and as she did, something extraordinary happened. Suddenly, she wasn't just feeling him, she was experiencing him. His thoughts, his memories, his emotions became hers. She saw through his eyes the moment he first spotted her in Ashford, felt the immediate recognition that had surged through him. Mine, his wolf had proclaimed, the only one. She experienced his agony on their wedding day, the searing pain when their hands touched that confirmed what he had feared. She was his true mate, and the curse had awakened. She lived through 7 years of longing, of watching her from afar, of drugging himself before her monthly visits, not out of rejection, but out of fear that his control would break and he would reach for her, doom her with his touch. And beneath it all, she felt his love, not as an abstract concept, but as a tangible force, powerful, enduring, absolute. In turn, she knew he was experiencing her memories, her initial excitement about their arranged marriage, her hopeful anticipation of their wedding night, the crushing disappointment when he had escorted her to her chambers and left without a word of explanation, the years of doubt, of wondering what was wrong with her, what made her so undesirable to her own husband. But also her strength, her determination to be a good queen despite her private pain, her love for their people, and the tiny, stubborn flame of hope she had never quite allowed to die. They experienced each other fully, completely, without the possibility of deception or misunderstanding, soul to soul, as the ritual intended. The connection deepened, intensified. Evelyn felt as if she were falling into Magnus, or perhaps he was falling into her. Boundaries blurred. Where she ended and he began became impossible to determine. The bond forms. Celine's voice penetrated the haze of sensation. Now focus on creation, on the child of prophecy. Both of you envision it, will it into being. Through their soul bond, Evelyn and Magnus reached for something new, a spark of potential floating in the space between them. Together they envisioned it growing, taking form. A child with her golden hair and his amber eyes. A perfect blend of both bloodlines, strong, powerful, loved beyond measure. Energy surged between them, building to a crescendo. The room began to shake, candles flickering wildly. The air grew thick with power. Evelyn felt as if her very essence was being torn from her body, reformed, and returned transformed. Then, at the peak of intensity, there was a flash of blinding light. Evelyn cried out, her back arching off the altar. Across from her, Magnus did the same. For one impossible moment, it felt as if they had actually touched, skin to skin, the curse momentarily suspended in this realm of pure spirit. Then the light faded, the energy dissipated, and Evelyn collapsed back onto the altar, gasping for breath. The connection receded, not severing completely, but diminishing to a soft hum in the background of her consciousness. She opened her eyes to find Magnus looking at her with wonder. She knew without words that he could still feel her, just as she could feel him. A permanent link had been forged between them, transcending physical limitations. "It is done," Selene said, her voice hoarse with exertion. "The ritual is complete." "Did it work?" Evelyn asked, her own voice barely above a whisper. "Did we conceive?" Selene placed a hand on Evelyn's abdomen, her eyes unfocusing as she looked beyond the physical realm. A smile slowly spread across her face. "Yes," she said simply, "the child of prophecy grows within you." Magnus made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Through their new bond, Evelyn felt his overwhelming joy and relief, so powerful it brought tears to her own eyes. "Rest now," Selene instructed, helping Evelyn to sit up. "The ritual has drained you both, and tomorrow we face Ravenna," Magnus finished, his voice strengthening with new determination. "Together," Evelyn added. Through their bond, she sent him her certainty, her resolve, and received his in return. Whatever came next, they would face it as one, no longer separated by misunderstanding and silence, but united in purpose and truth. As they left the ritual chamber, Evelyn realized something had fundamentally changed, not just the soul bond, not just the miraculous child now growing within her, but her understanding of the past 7 years, of Magnus, of herself. What had seemed like rejection had been protection. What had felt like indifference had been the deepest kind of love, one willing to endure pain and loneliness to keep her safe. And now, through the magic of the ritual, she carried that love within her, a physical manifestation of what had existed between them all along, unseen and unexpressed, but real nonetheless. The next morning, Evelyn woke to a strange sensation, a presence in her mind that wasn't her own. Magnus. Even in sleep, their new bond remained active. She could sense him in his own chambers, already awake, his thoughts a swirl of strategies and preparations for the coming confrontation with Ravenna. She placed a hand on her abdomen, still flat, but now harboring the most precious of secrets. There was no physical sign yet of the miracle they had created, but she could feel it, a tiny spark of life, burning bright with potential. Through the bond, she felt Magnus's attention shift to her. His consciousness reached out, a gentle caress against her mind. "Are you well?" His thoughts came to her clearly, as if he'd spoken aloud. "Yes," she replied in kind, still marveling at this new form of communication. "The ritual took much from us both, but I'm recovered." Relief flowed from him to her. "The War Council meets in an hour. Will you join us?" "Of course. I am still queen, magical ritual or no." His amusement rippled through the bond. Indeed, and a formidable one. Evelyn rose and prepared for the day, her mind cataloging all that had changed in such a short time. 3 days ago, she had believed herself unwanted by her husband. Now she carried his child, conceived through magic rather than touch, and shared a soul bond that allowed her to feel his every emotion. It was overwhelming, to say the least. When she entered the council chamber an hour later, all eyes turned to her. Word of the ritual had spread throughout the castle. Servants and nobles alike watched her with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Through the bond, she could feel Magnus's pride as she took her seat beside him, her head held high despite the whispers. Captain Thorne stood at attention nearby, his expression grim. "The reports from the northern borders continue to worsen, Your Majesties. 3 more villages have been frozen. No survivors." "And the creatures?" Magnus asked. "Growing in number. Our scouts estimate at least 100 now, possibly more." "They're called the Frozen," Celine interjected, her face pale from the exertion of the previous night's ritual. "Ravenna creates them from living beings. Human, werewolf, vampire. It doesn't matter. She freezes their hearts and binds their souls to her will." A murmur of horror rippled through the council members. "Can they be killed?" one asked. "Yes," Magnus answered. "Fire works best. Silver for those with vampire blood. But they're difficult to bring down. And for each one that falls, Ravenna can create 2 more from the fallen." "Then what hope do we have?" another counselor demanded. "If we cannot defeat her army—" "We don't need to defeat her army," Evelyn said, her voice cutting through the rising panic. "We need to defeat her." All eyes turned to her. "The child," someone whispered. "The ritual succeeded?" Evelyn met Magnus's gaze, feeling his support through their bond. "Yes, I carry the child of prophecy. But the child is not yet born, not yet able to fulfill its destiny. Until then, we must hold Ravenna at bay." "How long?" Captain Thorne asked bluntly. "The texts describe an accelerated gestation," Celine explained. "Days rather than months. But still, we need time." "Time we don't have," Magnus said grimly. "Ravenna arrives tonight." "Then we must be ready," Evelyn declared. "Every available fighter armed with silver and fire. The castle defenses strengthened, the civilians evacuated to the southern strongholds." "And the 2 of you?" Captain Thorne asked, looking between his king and queen. "We will face Ravenna directly," Magnus said, "as the prophecy demands." The council erupted in protests. Magnus silenced them with a raised hand. "This is not open for debate. The Ice Witch comes for me. She always has. I will not hide while our people fight and die." "And I stand with my king," Evelyn added firmly. Through their bond, she felt Magnus's surge of emotion at her words. Pride, gratitude, fear for her safety. Or, "The queen should be protected," one of the older counselors insisted, "if she carries the prophesied child." "The queen," Evelyn interrupted coolly, "is not some fragile vessel to be hidden away. I am a moonshade, and the magic of my bloodline runs strong. I will face this threat alongside my husband, as is my right and my duty." No further objections were raised. The council moved on to practical matters: evacuation routes, defensive positions, weapon distribution. Through it all, Evelyn remained acutely aware of Magnus beside her, his presence in her mind a constant reassurance. When the council adjourned, they found themselves alone in the chamber. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, a luxury denied them for 7 years, when his gaze had always slid away from hers. "You should reconsider," he said finally. "The counselor wasn't wrong. You carry our only hope for defeating Ravenna permanently." "I carry our child," Evelyn corrected gently, "and I will protect it with my life. But that doesn't mean hiding while you face the witch alone." Through their bond, she sent him her determination, her refusal to be separated from him now that they had finally found each other. "We are stronger together. The ritual proved that." Magnus closed his eyes briefly, absorbing her emotions. When he opened them again, the amber had deepened to burnished gold, his wolf closer to the surface than usual. "Together, then," he conceded. "But promise me something." What? If the moment comes when you must choose between standing with me or protecting our child, choose the child. Evelyn wanted to refuse, to insist there would be no such choice, but the solemnity in his eyes, the depth of his concern flowing through their bond, stopped her. I promise, she said softly, but you must promise me something in return. Anything. Don't sacrifice yourself needlessly. We've lost too much time already, Magnus. 7 years of distance. I won't lose you just when I've found you. His smile was tinged with sadness. 400 years I've lived under this curse, Evelyn. 4 centuries of watching everyone I care for grow old and die, while I remained unchanged. But these last 7 years with you, even with the distance between us, they've been the most meaningful of my existence. Whatever happens tonight, know that you gave me that gift. Emotion welled up within her, too complex for words. Instead, she sent it through their bond. Her gratitude for his protection all these years, her regret for the time lost, her determination that they would have a future together. He received it all, his own emotions flowing back to her in a tide of warmth that made her breath catch. We should prepare, he said finally, reluctantly breaking the moment. Ravenna will come at moonrise. The rest of the day passed in a flurry of activity. The castle was fortified, civilians evacuated, fighters armed with silver weapons and fire. Celine worked tirelessly, combining her prophetic abilities with ancient defenses to create wards around the castle's perimeter. As evening approached, Evelyn stood at the window of her chambers, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. The sky to the north was unnaturally dark, swirling with storm clouds that glowed with an eerie blue light. Ice clouds, Ravenna's signature. A knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. "Enter," she called, expecting a servant with a final report. Instead, it was Magnus who stepped into her chambers. He wore his battle armor, black and silver, the blackthorn crest emblazoned on the breastplate. At his side hung an ancient sword, said to have been forged in dragonfire centuries ago. He stopped just inside the doorway, maintaining the physical distance the curse demanded. But through their bond, she felt him reach for her. His presence in her mind was a balm, steadying her nerves. "It's almost time," he said simply. Evelyn nodded. She was already dressed for battle, in armor modified to fit her smaller frame. Her golden hair was braided tightly against her head, practical for the fight to come. At her hip hung a silver dagger, enchanted by Celine to burn with magical fire when drawn. "The eastern tower is prepared," she said. "Celine believes it's the most defensible position, with the clearest line of sight to the northern approach. And our people? The evacuation is complete. Only fighters remain in the castle, and they know their positions." She hesitated. "There's something else you should know. Something Celine discovered in the ancient texts." Magnus's attention sharpened. "What is it?" "The curse that prevents you from touching me. It's tied to Ravenna's life force. If she dies—" "The curse breaks," he finished, hope and disbelief warring in his voice. "But she can't be killed. Not by any conventional means. We've tried. For centuries, Blackthorn kings have tried." "Not with the child of prophecy," Evelyn pointed out. "Not with our bloodlines united." "The child isn't born yet," Magnus reminded her gently. "No, but it exists, and already I can feel its power growing within me." She placed a hand on her abdomen. Through their bond, she let him feel what she was experiencing, the subtle but unmistakable pulse of magic emanating from their unborn child. Celine believes this power might be enough to at least weaken Ravenna, to make her vulnerable. Magnus absorbed this new information, hope warring with caution. "Even if that's true, we can't risk—" "I'm not suggesting I face her directly," Evelyn assured him. "But if the opportunity arises, if there's a moment when she's vulnerable, we need to be ready." Before Magnus could respond, a horn sounded from the castle walls. A warning. The first of Ravenna's forces had been spotted. "It's time," Magnus said, his voice deepening to the commanding tone of the Alpha King. Together, they made their way to the eastern tower. The circular room at its top offered a panoramic view of the lands surrounding Shadowcrest Castle. To the north, the unnatural storm had grown, lightning flashing blue-white against dark clouds. And emerging from that storm, a line of figures approached. The frozen, Ravenna's twisted army. Celine was already in the tower, along with Captain Thorne and a handful of elite guards. Her eyes glowed with prophetic sight as she stared out at the approaching army. "She comes," she whispered, The Ice Witch. After 3 centuries in the void, she returns to finish what she began. As if summoned by her words, a new figure emerged from the storm clouds. A woman, floating above her army, surrounded by swirling ice crystals. Even at this distance, Evelyn could make out her terrible beauty. Hair as white as snow, skin pale as moonlight, lips blue as midwinter ice. She wore a gown of what appeared to be living frost, shifting and reforming with her every movement. Ravenna Dreadwinter, the Ice Witch who had cursed the Blackthorn line, the woman who had murdered 99 alphas and sought Magnus as her 100th. "She's more powerful than before," Magnus murmured, his eyes fixed on the approaching figure. "The centuries in the void have strengthened her." Through their bond, Evelyn felt his memories surface. A younger Magnus, barely into his 4th decade, confronting Ravenna as she slaughtered his pack. The agony as the curse was laid upon him, binding him to an immortal existence where he could never touch his true mate. The final battle where his ancestor, King Alistair, had sacrificed his life to banish Ravenna to the void between worlds. "But so are we," Evelyn reminded him, sending strength through their connection. "We have something she doesn't expect, something she fears." Magnus nodded, his resolve hardening. The child of prophecy. The Frozen reached the castle's outer defenses first. Grotesque creatures that had once been human, werewolf, and vampire, now twisted into servants of ice. They moved with unnatural speed, their bodies radiating cold so intense it froze the ground beneath their feet. When the first wave hit the silver-enhanced barriers Celine had erected, an unholy shriek filled the air. "The wards hold," Celine reported, her voice strained with the effort of maintaining the magical defenses. But not for long. Her power erodes them with each attack. Captain Thorne turns to his king. "The men are in position, Your Majesty. They await your command." Magnus gave a single nod. "Light the fires." The captain relayed the order through a speaking trumpet. Moments later, great bonfires ignited along the castle walls, their heat creating a barrier that the ice creatures would find difficult to penetrate. But it was Ravenna herself who concerned Evelyn. The witch continued her approach, floating above her army, her eyes fixed on the eastern tower, as if she knew exactly who waited for her there. "She senses you," Evelyn said to Magnus. "She knows you're here." "Good," he replied grimly. "Let her come to me." The first wave of Frozen broke against the castle's defenses. Some fell to silver arrows shot by defenders on the walls. Others succumbed to the great fires. But for each that fell, the snow beneath them swirled and reformed, creating 2 more to take their place. "We can't win a war of attrition," Captain Thorne observed tensely, "not against an army that grows with each casualty." "We don't need to," Magnus said. "We only need to hold until—" A blast of cold so intense it froze the very air cut off his words. The tower shuddered as something struck it with tremendous force. Ice crystals formed instantly on the stone walls, spreading like living things. "She's attacking directly," Celine gasped, her eyes wide with fear. "The tower won't hold against her power." Another blast struck, stronger than the first. Cracks appeared in the ancient stone. The temperature in the room plummeted, their breath fogging in the suddenly frigid air. "Evacuate," Magnus ordered the guards. "Get to your secondary positions, now." The men hesitated, looking between their king and the door. "That was an order!" Magnus's voice took on the alpha resonance, impossible to disobey. The guards saluted and withdrew, leaving only Magnus, Evelyn, Celine, and Captain Thorne in the tower. "You should go too," Magnus told the captain. "Lead the defense below." Thorne straightened to his full height. "My place is with my king." Before Magnus could argue, a third blast hit the tower, this one powerful enough to shatter one of the windows. Ice-laden wind howled through the opening, bringing with it the scent of winter and death. And then she was there. Ravenna Dreadwinter floated just outside the broken window, her beauty even more terrible up close. Her eyes were the pale blue of deep ice, pupilless and cold. Her lips curved in a smile that held no warmth. "Magnus Blackthorne," she purred, her voice like icicles shattering. "How I've waited for this moment. How I've dreamed of it in the endless dark of the void." Magnus stepped forward, placing himself between the witch and Evelyn. "Ravenna, you look, well, for someone who's been banished for 3 centuries. The witch's laughter was like breaking glass. "Always the defiant one, the only alpha to ever escape me, but not for much longer." Her cold gaze moved past him, fixing on Evelyn. "And you've brought me a gift. Your mate." How thoughtful. Through their bond, Evelyn felt Magnus's surge of protective rage. "This is between us, Ravenna. Leave her out of it." "Oh, but I can't do that." Ravenna floated into the room, ice spreading beneath her feet as she touched the stone floor. "She's part of this now. Part of the curse. Part of the prophecy." Her head tilted, eyes narrowing as she studied Evelyn more closely. "In fact, she's more than that now, isn't she? I can sense it. The child." Fear spiked through Evelyn, but she kept her expression neutral. "You know about the prophecy?" "Of course I do, little queen. Why do you think I've returned now, after all this time? I felt the potential awakening, the threat to everything I've built." Ravenna's smile turned cruel. "But prophecies are such fragile things, so easily broken." She raised a hand, ice crystals swirling around her fingers. Before she could strike, Magnus drew his sword, the ancient blade igniting with golden fire the moment it left its sheath. "You'll have to go through me first," he growled, his wolf rising close to the surface. "With pleasure," Ravenna hissed. "I've waited 300 years to complete my collection. Your blood will make me truly immortal, beyond even the reach of prophecy." She attacked with breathtaking speed, ice daggers flying from her fingertips. Magnus deflected them with his flaming sword, each impact releasing a hiss of steam. Through their bond, Evelyn felt his determination, his focus, his absolute commitment to protecting her and their unborn child. Captain Thorne drew his own weapon, a heavy silver axe, and moved to support his king. Together, they pressed Ravenna back toward the broken window, working in tandem with the precision of warriors who had trained together for years. Celine grabbed Evelyn's arm. "We need to go, now, while she's distracted." "I won't leave him," Evelyn protested. "You promised," Celine reminded her urgently. "You promised to protect the child if it came to a choice." Through the bond, Evelyn felt Magnus's agreement. "Go," he urged silently. "I'll hold her as long as I can. Get somewhere safe." Every instinct rebelled against leaving him to face Ravenna alone. But the tiny spark of life within her, their miracle, their hope, needed protection. "This way," Celine tugged her toward a concealed door in the tower wall. "There's a passage that leads to the ritual chamber. We'll be safe there." With a last anguished look at Magnus, still locked in combat with the Ice Witch, Evelyn followed her sister through the hidden door. The passage was narrow and dark, lit only by Celine's hastily conjured witchlight. They descended rapidly, the sounds of battle fading behind them. "What happens if he can't hold her?" Evelyn asked, fear making her voice sharp. "Then we move to the contingency plan," Celine replied grimly. "The ritual chamber is warded. Not even Ravenna can breach it easily. It will give us time." "Time for what?" Celine didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was heavy with the weight of prophecy. "Time for the child to grow. Time for you to prepare for what must come next." They reached the bottom of the passage and emerged into the ritual chamber where just hours before they had performed the soul binding. The candles still burned, though lower now, casting long shadows across the stone. "What do you mean, what must come next?" Evelyn demanded, grabbing her sister's arm. "Celine, what aren't you telling me?" Celine's dark eyes were troubled. "There's a part of the prophecy I didn't share, a part I hoped wouldn't be necessary." A cold that had nothing to do with Ravenna's ice magic settled in Evelyn's stomach. "Tell me." "The child of prophecy can defeat Ravenna, yes, but to do so, it needs to be born." "Of course it does. That's why we're trying to buy time." "No," Celine interrupted. "It needs to be born now, tonight." Evelyn stared at her sister in disbelief. "That's impossible. Even with the accelerated gestation, it's only been hours since conception. With the right magic, it's possible." Celine moved to one of the silver bowls still arrayed around the altar. "Dangerous, but possible. I've prepared everything we might need, just in case." "In case what? In case Magnus fails?" The thought sent a spike of pain through Evelyn's heart. As if in answer, a tremor ran through the castle, so powerful it sent dust raining from the ceiling. Through their bond, Evelyn felt Magnus's pain, followed by a surge of determination. He was still fighting, but Ravenna was gaining ground. "He won't be able to hold her for long," Celine said quietly. "No one could. She's too powerful, especially here, on the night of the full moon." Another tremor, stronger than the first. The candles flickered wildly, some extinguishing altogether. "What are you suggesting?" Evelyn asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "A birth ritual. Ancient magic that will accelerate the child's development to full term in a matter of minutes." Celine's face was grave. But Evelyn, you need to understand. This magic comes at a price, a terrible price. What price? Life force. Specifically, yours. Celine took her sister's hands. To give the child the strength it needs to defeat Ravenna, you would have to pour almost all of your life force into it. You would be left diminished, possibly fatally so. The implications hit Evelyn like a physical blow. You're asking me to choose between my life and my child's. I'm asking you to consider what Magnus is fighting for up there. Celine's voice cracked with emotion. What you both created the child for in the first place, not just as an heir, not just as a family, but as the only hope against Ravenna's darkness. Through their bond, Evelyn felt Magnus take another hit, the pain lancing through her own body as if it were her own. His determination never wavered, but his strength was flagging. There has to be another way, she insisted. If there was, I would have found it. Celine's eyes filled with tears. I've searched every text, consulted every oracle. This is the path the prophecy has always pointed to. Another tremor shook the castle, this one violent enough to knock several silver bowls from their stands. Through the bond, Evelyn felt Magnus's desperation as Ravenna pressed her advantage. She's too strong, his thoughts came to her, tinged with pain and regret. I can't hold her much longer. Captain Thorne has fallen, the defenses are breached. He didn't ask her to perform the ritual, didn't even suggest it. His only concern, flowing through their bond, was for her safety and that of their child. His love, pure and selfless, washed over her. And in that moment, Evelyn made her choice. Show me, she said to Celine. Show me how to perform the ritual. Relief and grief warred on her sister's face. It must be your decision, freely given. It is. Evelyn placed a hand on her abdomen, feeling the tiny spark of life within. Magnus's child. Their miracle. Their hope. I choose our child. I choose our future. Even if she might not live to see it. Above them, the battle raged on. Through their bond, Evelyn sent Magnus her love, her decision, her determination, and felt his anguished understanding in return. The ritual to bring their child into the world had begun, and with it, the final confrontation with Ravenna Dreadwinter. The ritual chamber pulsed with ancient magic as Celine prepared for the birth ceremony. Sacred runes glowed along the stone walls, activated by the power surging through the castle as Magnus battled Ravenna above. Evelyn lay on the ritual altar, her breath coming in short gasps as her sister worked frantically around her. Are you certain this is the only way? Evelyn asked, though she already knew the answer. Through her soul bond with Magnus, she could feel his strength waning. Each blow from Ravenna drove him closer to defeat. It is, Celine said grimly. The child of prophecy must be born tonight, or all is lost. She placed her hands on Evelyn's still flat abdomen. The ritual will accelerate the pregnancy to full term in minutes. It will be painful. Pain doesn't frighten me. Evelyn closed her eyes, focusing on the tiny spark of life within her. Conceived only hours ago through the soul-binding ritual, the child already radiated power beyond anything she had ever felt. What comes after frightens me more. Celine paused in her preparations, her dark eyes troubled. I wish there was another way. There isn't. Evelyn's voice grew stronger with conviction. I've felt it through our bond. Magnus can't defeat her alone. No one can. Our child is the only hope. Above them, the castle shuddered. The sound of battle grew louder. Shouts, the clash of weapons, the unholy shrieking of the frozen. And beneath it all, the bone-deep cold of Ravenna's power seeping through stone and wood, seeking them out. She knows what we're attempting, Celine whispered. She's trying to reach us. Evelyn nodded, unsurprised. Ravenna had known about the prophecy, had known about the child. That was why she'd returned now, after centuries in the void between worlds, to destroy the one thing that threatened her immortality. How much time do we have? Not enough. Celine arranged 7 silver bowls in a circle around the altar, each containing a different element of the birth ritual. Sacred water, midnight rose petals, moonstone powder, crushed herbs, white candle wax, a lock of Evelyn's golden hair, and a few precious drops of Magnus's blood collected during the soul binding. The ritual requires balance, Celine explained, lighting black candles at the circle's perimeter. Life force transferred from mother to child. Normally this happens gradually over months. We're compressing that process into minutes. And the cost? Evelyn asked directly. Celine's hands trembled slightly. Most of your life force. Perhaps all of it. You mean I'll die? I don't know, Celine admitted. No one has attempted this particular ritual in living memory. The texts speak of the mother being diminished, but they're not specific about what that means. Another tremor shook the chamber, more violent than before. Dust and small stones rained from the ceiling. Through their bond, Evelyn felt Magnus's pain as Ravenna landed a powerful blow. His thoughts reached for hers, desperate with concern. She's breached the inner defenses. Where are you? In the ritual chamber, Evelyn answered silently. Celine prepares the birth ceremony. His shock and horror flooded the bond. No! It's too dangerous! Too soon! We have no choice, Magnus. You cannot defeat her alone. His anguish was a living thing between them. I never wanted this. Never wanted you to sacrifice yourself. I know! Evelyn poured her love through the connection. But I choose this. For our child. For our people. For you. Before he could respond, their connection wavered. Evelyn gasped, feeling his pain as Ravenna struck again. He was weakening rapidly. We must begin now, Celine said urgently. Magnus cannot hold her much longer. Evelyn nodded, her decision made. Tell me what to do. Celine handed her a chalice filled with a glowing blue liquid. Drink this, all of it. It will begin the process. Evelyn took the chalice with steady hands. The liquid within smelled of midnight and magic, of power ancient and terrible. She raised it to her lips and drank deeply, not stopping until she had consumed every drop. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Heat surged through her body, centering in her womb where the tiny spark of life resided. That spark ignited, becoming a flame, then a conflagration. Her back arched in agony as her abdomen began to swell visibly. Months of growth compressed into seconds. Celine began to chant in the ancient language of their bloodline, her hands moving in complex patterns above Evelyn's rapidly changing body. The contents of the 7 silver bowls began to glow, each a different color, their light swirling together to form a protective dome over the ritual altar. Evelyn screamed as her body transformed, bones shifting, tissues stretching, the child within growing at an impossible rate. She could feel its consciousness forming, awakening, reaching for her mind, not with words, but with pure emotion, love, confusion, determination, and power. So much power. The combined magic of both bloodlines, concentrated and amplified beyond anything she had imagined possible. Through waves of agony, she maintained her connection to Magnus, letting him feel what was happening. His horror and grief mingled with desperate hope, his love for her a constant presence despite the battle he fought above. The first stage is complete, Celine announced, her voice strained with the effort of maintaining the ritual. The child has reached full development. Now comes the birth itself. Evelyn could barely focus on her sister's words. Her entire being was consumed by the sensation of the powerful life within her, now fully formed and pressing to be free. The dome of light above her pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, its colors shifting from gentle blues and greens to urgent reds and golds. When I tell you, Celine instructed, you must push with everything you have, not just physically, but with your magic, your will, your very essence. You must give the child everything. Everything. Evelyn understood what that meant. All her life force, all her power, possibly her life itself. Through their bond, she felt Magnus's desperation. Don't do this, he pleaded. There must be another way. There isn't, she responded with calm certainty. This was always my destiny, to bring forth the child who would save us all. The chamber shook violently. Cracks appeared in the ceiling, and the temperature plummeted. Ice crystals formed on the stone walls, spreading like ghostly fingers reaching for them. She comes, Celine whispered, fear evident in her voice. Ravenna has defeated the outer defenses. Magnus cannot hold her any longer. Evelyn felt it through the bond. Magnus's final stand against the Ice Witch. His strength nearly gone, his body battered, he still fought with everything he had. For her, for their child, for their kingdom. Now, Evelyn, Celine commanded, push, give everything. Evelyn gathered her strength, her magic, her will, and pushed with all her being. The pain transcended the physical, becoming something cosmic and terrible. She felt her life force flowing out of her, into the child, strengthening it for what was to come. The dome of light above them pulsed brilliantly, then shattered in a cascade of multicolored sparks as the child emerged into the world. A boy, perfect and beautiful, with golden hair like hers and amber eyes like his father's. He did not cry as normal newborns do, but stared up at the chamber ceiling with ancient awareness in his gaze. "Orion," Evelyn whispered, the name coming to her from somewhere beyond conscious thought. "Son of the Alpha King and the Moonshade Seer, child of prophecy." She reached for him with trembling arms, suddenly weak beyond measure. Celine placed the child on her chest, and Evelyn felt what remained of her strength flowing into him, completing the transfer the ritual had begun. "He's perfect," Celine said in awe, "the most powerful being ever born of both bloodlines." Evelyn smiled faintly, her vision beginning to dim at the edges. Through her bond with Magnus, she felt his battle reaching its climax. Ravenna had him cornered, her ice magic freezing the very air around him. His sword arm was numb, his body failing. "She's nearly here," Evelyn whispered. "Magnus cannot stop her." As if summoned by her words, the chamber door burst inward in an explosion of ice and wood. Ravenna Dreadwinter floated through the opening, her beautiful face contorted with rage. Behind her, barely standing, came Magnus, his armor shattered, blood freezing on his skin, his legendary sword broken in his hand. "Did you think I wouldn't find you?" Ravenna hissed, her ice-blue eyes fixing on the child in Evelyn's arms. "Did you think your pitiful ritual would succeed without my knowledge?" Through their bond, Evelyn felt Magnus's despair. "I'm sorry," he sent. "I couldn't stop her." "You weren't meant to," Evelyn replied. "You were only meant to delay her until the child was born." "The prophecy child," Ravenna said, gliding closer. Ice formed beneath her feet with each step, spreading across the ritual chamber floor. "The supposed threat to my power." Her laugh was like breaking icicles. "Look at him, a mere infant, and you, little queen, barely clinging to life after the ritual. What threat could you possibly pose to me now?" Celine stepped forward, placing herself between Ravenna and the altar where Evelyn lay with her newborn son. "You fear them, or you wouldn't have returned from the void," she challenged. "You know the prophecy is true." "I fear nothing," Ravenna snarled, flinging out a hand. A blast of cold struck Celine, sending her flying across the chamber to crash into the far wall. She slumped to the ground, unconscious or worse. "Celine," Evelyn cried weakly. Magnus lunged toward Ravenna with the last of his strength, the broken remnant of his sword raised to strike. Without even looking at him, she gestured sharply. Ice erupted around his legs, trapping him in place. "I have waited 3 centuries for this moment," Ravenna said, turning back to Evelyn and the child. "To complete my collection of alpha blood, to extinguish the Blackthorn line forever, and now to destroy the one being prophesied to defeat me." Her smile was cruel. "How convenient that you're all gathered here for me." She raised both hands, ice crystals swirling between her fingers. "I think I'll start with the child, make you watch as I freeze the life from him, then your mate, and finally you, little queen. The last thing you'll see is everyone you love turn to ice." Evelyn clutched Orion closer, her body too weak to stand, to fight, to run. But as Ravenna's power gathered, something unexpected happened. The child in her arms opened his tiny mouth and wailed. It was not the cry of a normal infant. It resonated with power, with ancient magic. The sound vibrated through the chamber, shattering the ice that formed around them. Ravenna staggered backward, her hands flying to her ears. "What is this?" she shrieked. Orion's cry grew louder, more focused. His amber eyes glowed with inner light, and Evelyn felt power surging through him, her power, Magnus's power, and something more, something older than both their bloodlines. "The prophecy!" Magnus gasped, breaking free of the ice that had trapped him. "The child of both bloodlines, born of soul binding rather than flesh. He carries power beyond anything we've known." Ravenna recovered quickly, her beautiful face twisting with hatred. "No child can defeat me!" She hurled a blast of ice directly at Orion. Without thinking, operating on pure maternal instinct, Evelyn turned, shielding her son with her body. The ice struck her back, and cold beyond imagining spread through her weakened form. She gasped, feeling her life force flickering, failing. "Evelyn!" Magnus's anguished cry echoed through the chamber. Through their bond, she felt his desperate love, his rage, his helplessness, but also something else, a realization dawning. "The curse," he sent to her. "If I touch you now." The curse would activate, she understood immediately. One of them would die, but she was already dying from the ritual's effects and Ravenna's ice, perhaps. "Yes," she replied through the bond. "Touch me, Magnus. Break the curse. Save our son." "No!" Ravenna screamed, understanding passing across her face. She lunged forward, but Orion's power flared again, creating a barrier she could not immediately penetrate. Magnus crossed the chamber in 3 long strides, his eyes never leaving Evelyn's. 400 years of longing, of loving from a distance, of never being able to touch his true mate. 7 years of watching her from across rooms, of drugging himself to avoid the temptation of her presence. All of it had led to this moment. "I have loved you from the first moment I saw you," he said, reaching for her. "I will love you beyond the last." Their hands met, skin to skin for the first time since their wedding day. The curse activated instantly. Searing pain shot through both of them, visible as dark energy crackling around their joined hands. Through their bond, they shared the agony, each trying to absorb more than their share, to spare the other. But something unexpected happened. The curse's energy, instead of destroying one of them, flowed into Orion. The infant absorbed it, his tiny body glowing with power as he transformed the dark magic into something new, something pure. Ravenna screamed in genuine fear. "No, this isn't possible. The curse is bound to my life force." "And now it returns to its source," Magnus said, his voice gaining strength as the curse's power left him. For the first time in centuries, he felt truly alive, the immortal half-life imposed by the curse falling away. Orion's glow intensified until he was too bright to look at directly. The power he had absorbed from the curse, from Evelyn's life force, from Magnus's centuries of accumulated magic, focused into a single beam of pure light that struck Ravenna squarely in the chest. The Ice Witch's scream echoed through the chamber as the light penetrated her, illuminating her from within. Her perfect beauty cracked like an ice sculpture in spring, revealing the ancient, withered creature beneath the enchantment. "This cannot be," she wailed. "I am immortal. I have harvested the blood of 99 alphas." "But not the 100th, Magnus said, "and now you never will." The light from Orion intensified, and Ravenna's form began to dissolve, ice turning to water, water to mist, mist to nothing. With a final, terrible shriek, the Ice Witch who had terrorized generations of werewolves vanished, leaving nothing but a small pool of water on the ritual chamber floor. In the sudden silence, Magnus turned to Evelyn, still cradling their glowing son. The curse was broken, but the ritual had taken its toll. She was pale, her life force dangerously depleted, her body weakened beyond measure. "Stay with me," he begged, gathering her into his arms, touching her freely for the first time. "Please, Evelyn, stay with me." She smiled up at him, her eyes growing dim. "I gave everything," she whispered, "as the ritual demanded. For him, for you." "No," Magnus said fiercely. "I won't lose you now. Not when we can finally touch, finally be together." Orion squirmed between them, his glow subsiding but not disappearing entirely. He reached a tiny hand toward his mother's face, and where he touched her, color returned briefly to her pale skin. "He's trying to help her," came Celine's voice, weak but determined. She had regained consciousness and dragged herself to the altar. "The child has power we can't begin to comprehend, but he can't do it alone." "Tell me what to do," Magnus demanded. "The ritual took her life force, transferred it to Orion," Celine explained. "But now that Ravenna is defeated, now that the prophecy is fulfilled," she took a shuddering breath, "the curse bound you to immortality, Magnus. For centuries you've lived without aging, without being able to die. That power, that life force, it's still within you." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "I can give it to her." Celine nodded. "It might work. Your life force for hers, a reversal of the birth ritual." "Would I die?" "No. The immortality would end. You would age normally from this point forward, live a natural lifespan." Magnus didn't hesitate. "Tell me how." Working quickly, Celine repositioned the silver bowls that had been scattered during the confrontation with Ravenna. "Place your hands on her," she instructed. "One over her heart, one on her forehead. Focus your will, your intent. Visualize your life force flowing into her, reviving her." Magnus did as directed, cradling Orion between them with one arm, while placing his other hand on Evelyn's heart. Through their bond, tenuous now as her consciousness faded, he projected all his love, his devotion, his willingness to sacrifice. "Take what you need," he urged her. "Take everything." Celine began to chant in the ancient language, activating the remnants of the ritual magic still present in the chamber. The silver bowls glowed once more, but this time the energy flowed in reverse, from Magnus to Evelyn, from father to mother, from immortal to dying. Magnus felt the centuries of his unnatural existence draining from him. 400 years of accumulated power, of life unnaturally prolonged, flowed out of him and into Evelyn. He saw strands of silver appearing in his dark hair, felt subtle changes in his body as the curse's preserving effects faded. Through their bond, he felt the moment when the transfer reached Evelyn. Her consciousness flickered, then strengthened. Her heartbeat, barely perceptible before, grew stronger. Color returned to her pale cheeks. Orion, sensing the change, cooed softly. His tiny hands touched both his parents, creating a perfect circuit of power and love between the three of them. Finally, Celine lowered her hands, the chanting complete. "It's done," she said, exhaustion evident in her voice. What happens now depends on her strength of will. Magnus gathered Evelyn closer, pressing his lips to her forehead in a gesture that would have been impossible just hours before. "Come back to me," he whispered. "Come back to us." For a moment, nothing happened. Then Evelyn's eyelids fluttered. She took a deep, shuddering breath, and her eyes opened fully, focusing on Magnus's face. "You're touching me," she said wonderingly. "The curse." "Broken," he confirmed. "Ravenna is gone. Our son defeated her." Evelyn's gaze shifted to Orion, still nestled between them. The infant regarded his mother with those wise, amber eyes, a tiny smile lifting his perfect lips. "Our miracle," she whispered, touching his cheek. "Our hope." "How do you feel?" Magnus asked anxiously. Evelyn took stock of her body, her magic. She felt different, weaker in some ways, stronger in others. The ritual had fundamentally changed her, as had the transfer of Magnus's life force. But she was alive, whole. "Like I've been reborn," she said softly. "Just as our son has been born, a new beginning for all of us." Magnus helped her sit up slowly, supporting her as she adjusted to her transformed body. "The bond remains," he noted, feeling her presence still in his mind, her emotions mingling with his own. "Yes," she agreed, "but different now, deeper." Celine approached, moving gingerly from her own injuries. "The prophecy is fulfilled," she said. "The child of both bloodlines has defeated the Ice Witch. The curse is broken. The realm is safe." "And what comes next?" Evelyn asked. "What does the prophecy say about that?" Celine smiled, a rare expression of pure joy lighting her face. "Nothing. The prophecy ends here. What comes next is entirely up to you." Magnus looked down at his son, then at his wife, his true mate, whom he could finally touch, finally hold, finally love completely. "A future of our own choosing," he said wonderingly, after centuries bound by fate and curse. The castle above them had gone silent. The sounds of battle had ceased with Ravenna's destruction. Through the bond, Magnus sensed the frozen returning to their original states, the ice magic binding them dissipating, leaving confused but living beings in its wake. "Your people will need their king and queen," Celine said gently, "and their new prince." Magnus nodded, but made no move to leave the ritual chamber just yet. This moment, the first of their true life together, was too precious to rush. "Can you stand?" he asked Evelyn. "With help," she replied. Carefully, Magnus assisted her to her feet, one arm around her waist, the other cradling Orion. The simple pleasure of touching her without pain, without fear, was overwhelming. Her skin against his, her warmth, her scent, all the things he had denied himself for 7 long years. Through their bond, he felt her wonder matching his own. The joy of simple contact, of barriers finally broken. "I never thought this day would come," she admitted, "that we could touch, that we could truly be together." "I dreamed of it," Magnus said, "every night for 7 years, but I never truly believed it possible." Orion made a small sound, drawing their attention. Though only minutes old, he seemed impossibly aware, his eyes tracking their movements, his expression almost knowing. "He's extraordinary," Celine observed. "A being of prophecy, born of both bloodlines, conceived through soul binding rather than flesh. There's never been a child like him." "Will he be normal?" Evelyn asked, sudden concern in her voice. "Will he have a childhood, grow up, have a life of his own?" "I believe so," Celine said. "The prophecy never specified what would become of him after Ravenna's defeat. But he is still your son, still a child despite his power." As if to confirm this, Orion yawned, his eyelids drooping. The glow that had surrounded him since birth dimmed to a subtle shimmer. In that moment, he looked like any newborn, tired after the tremendous effort of being born. "We should take him somewhere comfortable," Evelyn said, maternal instincts surging despite her exhaustion. "Somewhere warm and safe." Magnus nodded. "Our chambers, both of us together, as it always should have been." Together, supporting each other, the new family made their way from the ritual chamber up through the hidden passage. Celine followed behind, watchful but giving them space for this precious first journey together. They emerged into a transformed castle. The ice that had coated the walls and floors was melting rapidly, leaving puddles but no lasting damage. Guards and servants who had been frozen by Ravenna's magic were thawing, confused but unharmed. "The king and queen!" someone shouted upon seeing them. "They live, and the child, the prince is born!" Word spread rapidly through the castle. As they made their slow way to the royal chambers, people lined the corridors, bowing deeply, murmuring blessings, gazing in wonder at the infant who had saved them all. Captain Thorne, battered but alive, appeared from a side passage. "Your Majesties," he said, kneeling before them. "The witch?" "Defeated," Magnus confirmed, "by our son." Wonder crossed the captain's weathered face. The prophecy was true. "Yes, gather the council, those who remained loyal. We'll meet tomorrow to begin rebuilding." Magnus paused. "And Captain?" "Sire, have it announced throughout the kingdom. Ravenna Dreadwinter is no more. The curse is broken. A new age begins today." The captain saluted and departed to carry out his orders. Magnus and Evelyn continued their journey, finally reaching the royal chambers. Magnus's rooms, which would now be theirs together. Servants hurried to prepare a makeshift cradle, to light fires, to bring warm water and clean linens. Through it all, Evelyn kept Orion close, unwilling to relinquish him even for a moment. The bond between mother and child, already profound through the ritual that had nearly killed her, had only strengthened with Ravenna's defeat. When they were finally alone, Magnus sat beside Evelyn on their bed, Orion sleeping peacefully between them. For a long moment they simply gazed at each other, savoring the freedom to look directly, to touch, to be together without the curse hanging over them. "I don't know where to begin," Magnus admitted. 7 years of keeping my distance, of hiding my feelings. And now we have everything, Evelyn finished for him. Everything we thought impossible. She reached for his hand, twining her fingers with his. Such a simple gesture, yet one that would have caused agony just hours before. Now it brought only warmth, connection, love flowing freely through their bond. "I feel different," Magnus said, examining his own hand. A few age lines had appeared that hadn't been there before. His immortality was gone. "Mortal. Does it frighten you?" Evelyn asked. "After 4 centuries of unchanging existence?" Magnus considered the question seriously. "No," he decided. "It feels right. Natural. To age as you age. To share a normal lifespan with my mate and my son." "A normal lifespan might be an optimistic description," Evelyn said with a small smile. "Nothing about our family is quite normal, is it?" As if to emphasize her point, Orion stirred in his sleep, a soft glow briefly illuminating his tiny form before subsiding again. "No," Magnus agreed, chuckling softly. "Not normal at all, but ours." Evelyn's expression grew more serious. "What happened to me, during the ritual and after? I don't think I'm entirely the same either." "In what way?" "I gave almost everything to bring him forth," she said, looking down at their son. "My life force, my power. By all rights I should have died. But then you gave me your immortality, your accumulated power from 4 centuries under the curse." She looked up at him, her eyes troubled. "I don't know what that means for me. For us." Magnus considered this, feeling through their bond the changes in her. She was right. Something fundamental had shifted. The ritual had transformed her, and his life force had changed her further. "Whatever comes," he said firmly, "we face it together. No more secrets, no more separation. From this day forward, we are truly one." Evelyn nodded, relaxing against him. The simple pleasure of his arm around her shoulders, of her head resting against his chest, was still new enough to feel miraculous. "I kept the nursery ready," she said after a comfortable silence. "All these years, Each month on my way to your chambers, I would stop and look in. Imagine it filled with life. And now it will be, Magnus said softly. Yes. Evelyn smiled down at Orion. Though perhaps not immediately. He should stay close to us for now. Agreed. Magnus could not imagine being separated from either of them, not after everything they had endured to be together. Outside, the castle stirred with renewed activity. The sounds of cleanup and restoration drifted through the windows. The kingdom was healing already, just as they were. Will you tell me? Evelyn asked suddenly. About your life before, the centuries under the curse? You've lived through so much history that I know nothing about. I will tell you everything, Magnus promised. Every moment, every memory. We have time now. A lifetime. A lifetime, she echoed, the words sweet on her tongue. It still doesn't seem real. In response, Magnus leaned down and pressed his lips to hers, their first true kiss after 7 years of marriage. The bond between them flared with joy, with love, with the pure elation of barriers finally broken. When they parted, both were smiling. Real enough? Magnus asked, his voice husky with emotion. Getting there, Evelyn replied, though I might need more convincing. He obliged her gladly, kissing her again, deeper this time. Everything they had been denied, everything they had longed for in secret was finally possible. The curse was broken. Their son was born. The future, unknown, unwritten by prophecy, stretched before them. Orion stirred between them, opening his amber eyes. He regarded his parents solemnly for a moment, then smiled, a real smile, impossibly advanced for a newborn. Through their bond, they felt his contentment, his love, his awareness of the momentous changes he had helped bring about. Welcome to the world, Orion Blackthorn, Magnus said formally, son of the Alpha King and the Moonshade Queen, child of prophecy, prince of Shadowcrest. And most beloved child, Evelyn added softly, born of love that transcended a curse, born to be exactly who you choose to be. The infant's smile widened, and for a moment the subtle glow around him intensified. A blessing, Evelyn thought, a promise. Then he yawned again and settled back to sleep, just an ordinary baby after his extraordinary birth. Outside, dawn was breaking, the first sunrise of a new age for the kingdom of Shadowcrest. For the first time in centuries, Magnus Blackthorn greeted the morning not as an immortal cursed to eternal separation from his true mate, but as a man, a king, a husband, a father. And by his side, Evelyn Moonshade Blackthorn, no longer the rejected queen, but the beloved mate of the Alpha King, mother to the child of prophecy, her own power transformed and renewed through sacrifice and love. Through their bond, they shared the wonder of this moment, this beginning. Whatever came next would be their choice, their path, their story to write together. 3 years later, Evelyn stood at the nursery window, watching the last rays of sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. Behind her, she could hear Orion's delighted giggles as he played with wooden blocks on the floor. "Mama, look!" Her son's voice, so clear now, so full of life, made her smile. "Big tower." She turned to find him beaming at her, his dark hair falling into eyes that were unmistakably hers. Green with flecks of amber, bright and full of wonder. But his smile, that was all Magnus. "Very big," she agreed, crossing to kneel beside him. "The biggest tower in all the kingdom." "Like Papa's castle," Orion said proudly. "Yes," she said softly, "just like Papa's castle." The door opened and Magnus entered, still imposing in his royal regalia, despite the slight silver now threading his dark hair. The past 3 years had changed him subtly. A few lines around his eyes, a touch of silver at his temples, signs of mortality that only made him more handsome in Evelyn's eyes. "There's my warrior prince," Magnus said, swooping Orion up into his arms. The boy shrieked with delight as his father spun him around. "Defending the realm with your mighty tower?" "Yes, no bad witches can get in." Magnus's eyes met Evelyn's over their son's head. In the 3 years since Ravenna's defeat, there had been no sign of ice magic in the kingdom. The Frozen had returned to their original states, with no memory of their time as Ravenna's puppets. Peace had settled over Shadowcrest, deeper and more lasting than anyone could remember. "No bad witches," Magnus agreed, "not with you protecting us." He set Orion down and crossed to Evelyn, taking her in his arms with the casual intimacy that still thrilled her after so many years denied it. Their bond hummed between them, stronger than ever, evolving as they themselves had evolved. "The council meeting went well?" she asked. Very. The alliance with the Eastern Pax is finalized, and the treaty with the Bloodhaven vampires holds strong. He brushed a strand of golden hair from her face. All thanks to you, my diplomatic queen. Evelyn smiled, leaning into his touch. The changes wrought by the ritual and the transfer of Magnus's immortality had left her with unexpected gifts. Her intuition had sharpened, her natural healing abilities enhanced. She had become a bridge between species, able to sense intentions and facilitate understanding in ways that had transformed the political landscape of their world. And you, my king, how do you fare after a day of tedious negotiations? Magnus's smile was warm. Better now that I'm with you, with both of you. Orion had returned to his blocks, building an even taller tower with intense concentration. At 3 years old, he was extraordinary in some ways, perfectly ordinary in others. He could read already, could sometimes predict events before they happened, and occasionally still glowed faintly when deeply emotional. But he also loved sweet cakes, threw tantrums when tired, and clung to a stuffed wolf toy at bedtime like any other child. He asked about the ice witch today, Evelyn said quietly. He remembered something from one of the court bard's songs. Magnus's expression grew serious. What did you tell him? The truth. A simplified version. That there was once a powerful witch who hurt people, and that he helped us defeat her when he was born. She shrugged slightly. He seemed satisfied with that for now. And when he's older, when he asks more questions, then we'll tell him more. Everything, eventually. He deserves to know his own story. Magnus nodded, his arm tightening around her waist. Our extraordinary son, who still needs his dinner and his bath, Evelyn reminded him with a smile. Together, they coaxed Orion away from his blocks, promising he could return to them after he'd eaten. The family made their way through the castle to the private dining room, where they took most of their meals. Servants bowed as they passed, smiling at the young prince, who waved cheerfully at everyone. Life had fallen into pleasant routines over the past 3 years. The kingdom prospered. The royal family thrived. The curse was a distant memory, though its effects lingered in subtle ways, in Magnus's gradual aging, in Evelyn's enhanced abilities, in Orion's occasional manifestations of power. After dinner, after Orion had been bathed and settled into bed with 3 stories and 5 goodnight kisses, Magnus and Evelyn retreated to their own chambers. The simple pleasure of preparing for bed together, of sharing the same space, had never diminished for either of them. Celine's message arrived while you were with the council, Evelyn mentioned as she brushed out her long golden hair. She's returning from the Southern Covens next week. Good. I've missed your sister's direct approach to court politics. Magnus smiled, removing his formal jacket. Did she say if her research was successful? She believes so. She's found references to other children of prophecy throughout history, cases similar to Orion's birth. It might help us understand more about what to expect as he grows. Magnus came to stand behind her, taking the brush from her hand to continue the task himself. The intimacy of the gesture, the gentle care with which he handled her hair, still made Evelyn's heart swell with gratitude for all they had gained. Are you worried about him? Magnus asked softly. Evelyn considered the question. Not worried exactly, just aware that his path will not be an ordinary one. I want to be prepared to help him navigate whatever comes. Through their bond, Magnus felt her deeper concerns, the protective fierceness of a mother, the weight of responsibility for a child whose birth had been prophesied for centuries, whose power had defeated an immortal witch when he was minutes old. We will face it together, Magnus reminded her, setting down the brush to massage her shoulders gently. Whatever comes, as we have faced everything else. Evelyn leaned back against him, savoring his warmth, his strength, his presence. Together, she agreed. Later, as they lay in bed, Evelyn curled against Magnus's side, her head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. She reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From arranged marriage to distant coexistence to soul-bonded partners. From curse to prophecy to freedom. What are you thinking? Magnus asked, his fingers trailing lazily up and down her arm. About time, she said thoughtfully. How much we lost, how much we've gained. How precious each moment is now that we know it's not endless. Magnus understood immediately. His immortality, surrendered to save her life, had given them both a deeper appreciation for the time they now had together. A normal lifespan, perhaps somewhat extended due to their unique circumstances, but finite nonetheless. I wouldn't change it, he said firmly. 400 years of immortality were nothing compared to one day being able to hold you, to touch you, to love you completely. Even knowing we will grow old, that someday we will die, especially knowing that. His arms tightened around her. Each day with you, with Orion, is a gift I never thought to have. Each touch, each moment, infinitely more precious because it will not last forever. Evelyn raised herself up to look into his eyes, letting him feel through their bond the depth of her love, her gratitude, her joy in their shared life. Forever would have been too lonely without this, she agreed. Without us. Magnus drew her down for a kiss that held all the passion, all the tenderness of a love that had survived a curse, a prophecy, a near sacrifice, a love that had transcended physical barriers to forge a soul-deep connection, a love that had created new life, new hope, new possibilities. Outside their window, the moon rose full and bright over Shadowcrest Kingdom. No ice clouds marred its perfection. No ancient witch threatened from the shadows. No curse separated those destined to be together. Just a family, bound by love and choice rather than prophecy. Just a future, unwritten and full of promise. And in the nursery down the hall, a special child slept peacefully, dreaming of towers tall enough to reach the stars.